A very bad situation. The big players have stopped buying and are even selling. Short-term holders, as usual, are selling at the bottom. Is there a chance we might face a big manipulation where everyone thinks the bull market continues, but the market plays a trick that no one is talking about at the moment? The most important on-chain data, so sit down because there's a lot to discuss. I wish you a pleasant viewing, give a thumbs up, subscribe, and let's get started. My dear viewers, we will start with the capital rotation net position change because it is a really important chart. The situation with Ethereum is still very weak, but it is not ruled out that the largest capital outflows from this coin are already behind us. We have hit an all-time high of the largest outflows, so maybe something will actually start happening here, especially since we are in a strong support zone when it comes to Ethereum. At the time when we were at $1,800, the outflows reached around $40 billion. If they were to increase even more, Ethereum would be looking at a drop, listen, to levels lower than $1,500 or maybe even $1,000, which, considering that we are still in a bull market, would be critical for this coin. That's why I've often said to look at the charts, look at my analysis. Because if we break the current zone on Ethereum, we could drop to those levels I just mentioned to you. It's worth observing this indicator in the context of the Pectra update. If we see a successive decrease in outflows from this coin before the update, then one might even consider buying Ethereum for a swing, for nice gains. For now, however, even though the price is good, making any large purchases of Ethereum just seems very risky. In fact, I recently bought some Ethereum myself precisely for this speculation with Pectra and the speculation of big players' purchases, so now it's just about observing this indicator. Watch what's happening and don't overdo it with purchases. At this moment, we see Bitcoin perpetual futures funding rates, and here, even though we are going down, you could say the funding rates practically remain positive all the time. I think this is the answer to the question of why we are going down. And until the situation with funding changes like it did in June 2001, the main trend will continue for now. This is also a perfect example of how little the general public matters in this market. Notice that there are more longs than shorts, yet despite this, the price lacks the strength to rebound. So until the intuitions return to play, my dear friends, we can forget about a bull market. Remember that upticks can certainly happen, but such further continuation, a bull market and breaking all-time highs on Bitcoin or altcoins, well, we still have time for that. Listen, at this moment, we are looking at the Bitcoin Coinbase Premium Index. If you're wondering about institutional investors, here you go. Here is a chart precisely showing their movements. As you can see, red bars dominate, which means that whales from Coinbase are currently selling Bitcoin. It is also very clear here that the daily candles are positive on Bitcoin. They are only positive when the candles on this indicator are also positive. Without Coinbase, my dear friends, there are no increases. Precisely, if the big players are selling, then where is the growth supposed to come from in this bull market if the retail investors mean so little? And their purchases are not, you could say, not critical, but still important. So here, for now, these increases can be driven up without volume by some larger groups. However, the biggest whales are currently selling. And let's not kid ourselves, this is definitely not a good sign because we should be following the whales, not going against them. And now, my dear friends, if we look at an equally important chart, namely retail investor volume from $0 to $10,000, demand, 30-day change. So, on the other hand, there's quite a bit of movement among retail investors, because there are many more of them than there were when Bitcoin corrected at $94,000. It's quite strange that there are so many street investors in the market, especially considering how difficult this market is right now. Perhaps retail investors still believe and are waiting for the alt season. And here, my dear friends, my perspective on the alt season, because there are many questions about whether it has happened, hasn't happened, or will happen. My dear friends, the alt season has relatively already occurred. If coins were able to make 8, 10, 15x gains, then what was that if not alt season? Of course, if there are people who bought at the peaks, then they experienced this alt season too late. They loaded up on altcoins. However, I still see some upward movements, so the alt season has already happened. Has it ended? I don't know yet. In my opinion, there should be some upward movements on Bitcoin. But I am very skeptical about whether such an alt season, as you might expect with 20, 30, 50x gains, will happen. In my opinion, not quite. That's why it's so important to take profits and build a strategy for what I simply want to do with these altcoins next. My dear friends, at this moment, let's take a look at liquidity because you know that it is the king in this market. So it's worth looking at this liquidity map at this moment. And notice that at the top, listen, it has become colorful. Those of you who watch my episodes regularly surely remember that just a few weeks ago, at the top, it was, listen, empty. Today it turns out that the top is packed up to $130,000, and there is slight liquidity at 160, but we won't focus on that because it doesn't make sense. The question is, whose liquidity is it that there are orders up to 160,000? Who has them, my dear friends? Of course, you can see that the liquidity at these lower levels is much higher. Does this mean we should go for it first? You may not fully realize that market makers like to play tricks on us with these charts, so at this point, you need to strictly watch how the chart will move. From my previous Bitcoin analysis episodes, will we first start breaking through this lower zone? 71,000 because we simply have huge liquidity here, or will we rather want to try to break out, take this as well, but there's not much to take from up here, so in my opinion, to continue building this market, it might actually create a bull market here. It should look like this, on the left side. So first, in my opinion, we should reach at least $70,000 and take this huge amount of dollars to build further bar structure on the chart. Listen, Bitcoin spot, cumulative volume, delta. The spot, CVD, made a brief comeback to the green side of the force, but then changed its mind and returned to the game. As the red team, meaning we had a quick spike. Oh, no, the mother-in-law is around the corner. Let's turn back. Red CVD. No bull market? Auto. It actually equals no bull market because the spot CVD is mainly shaped by two exchanges, Coinbase and Binance. If they are not buying and the price is going up, do not trust such increases, my dear friends, because these increases are packed without volume by some small players. So, there shouldn't be further continuation of the increases. So if the big players are actually not buying but rather selling, then you should know the direction and which way the chart will go. At this moment, we are in a downtrend, and if we are in a downtrend on the upticks, we secure shorts. My dear friends, at this moment we are looking at Bitcoin, miner, net position change. Miners made slight purchases, but it's nothing significant. So let's not waste time on them, because unfortunately the recent ones don't have much to tell us. They are unfortunately stagnant, and they probably don't really know what to do, just like the general public sometimes. So let's take a look at a very important indicator, namely the long-term hodler net position change, of course, on Bitcoin. Very strong information, namely that long-term hodlers have started aggressively buying up Bitcoin. Previously, such aggressive demand from them appeared before Trump's victory in the elections. In this cycle, long-term hodlers were not wrong when it came to their purchases and always bought perfectly. However, in the previous cycle, they made aggressive purchases, just as we perfectly entered the bear market. So to anyone who saw dollar signs in their eyes because they saw green, I advise you to cool down. Even long-term hodlers don't know when the end of the cycle is. And here, my dear friends, even though there are these purchases, indeed, one could say that the price is favorable, I wouldn't trust it too much. If you really want to make these purchases, where I also did very sensibly in small amounts, without fussing, without getting excited, because if we get a breakout to the downside, well, you definitely don't want to be in the red. Of course, the price is good. We have stopped at a very important support level when it comes to Bitcoin, so these purchases don't have to be foolish, although, to be honest, I don't trust them at this moment, considering that the big players aren't buying. Let's also take a look at the total supply health by short-term holders, which means short-term holders here. Ladies and gentlemen, ahead of us is a definition of the street. A chart showing the movements of short-term holders, very large, almost parabolic purchases when we were above 100,000, and now we have sales where we are at 80. Notice that exactly the same thing happened when we were before, Trump's victory. Back then, they also panicked and fled the market only to buy the most when we were, my dear friends, at the peak. So it's not Rafał Zaorski, or me, but the street is the best indicator. Remember that, where everyone is shouting to buy at 110,000. We're going to the moon. The only thing you need to do is simply click. Sell. So here again, the short sellers and hodlers, you could say, exposed themselves and were, so to speak, eaten by the chart, meaning they are again, quite a significant loss. Look at how incredible this looks. The street long-term short sellers and hodlers are selling at a point where they should be buying. And here Bitcoin futures open interest versus price change. And here, the declines are continuously caused by sell-offs. On the spot market as well. Well, everything is here, my dear friends. As usual, it's healthy. The guys are doing it well. Listen, let's take a look at the sell-side risk ratio, because on this indicator, we are still in a low liquidity zone. Therefore, I continue to advise everyone to be cautious, as the movements will be very, very manipulated. Don't be surprised if we get impulses and immediate corrective impulses in the near future. In my opinion, the market is not currently ready for parabolic healthy growth with volume. And here on the realized profit-loss ratio or the realized P&L, we again see a drop to a point where investors are realizing losses to reduce risk. And that's exactly what the market makers are aiming for. So here, my dear viewers, to summarize this episode and these charts a bit, I would like to tell you that the situation is not extremely rosy. I even see a push up to $100,000, up to $102,000, where we have a very important zone around these 100,000 to this 0.5, a really important place. Remember that at this moment we bounced off the main liquidity. However, my dear friends, you must pay attention to the 89,000 level. I will keep saying this. We are now in the fair value gap zone, so caution is needed. However, 89.5 thousand, this entire green zone is our main support to resistance flip, which we cannot easily break through. In fact, probably just entering the vicinity of this zone, we will immediately receive selling reactions. However, if we manage to exit this zone with volume, then indeed we could reach 100,000. However, my dear friends, as I said, let's not get too excited because liquidity is liquidity. It is the king in this market. So there might be a situation even after a surge where we could still hit levels as low as $68,000, which are the last bastion of the current bull market. If that level breaks, in my opinion, we have a strong, solid confirmation of a bear market. And my task is to show you scenarios, both positive and negative. You need to choose which side you are truly on, how you position your trades. My dear viewers, that's all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please subscribe, give a thumbs up, and hit the bell to not miss future episodes. Let me know in the comments what you think about the current market and which direction you believe it will take. At this moment, the market will be fluctuating, so the sentiment from the comments will definitely be useful. Meanwhile, I sincerely thank you. Take care. See you. Until next time.